listening to Kai on The Voice, and today I have got a guest with me. I've got Ellie from London 360 in the studio. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for coming in. I can't wait to kind of get into the crux of why you're here. But just to kind of to introduce anyone, let us know who you are and what you're doing here today. Just in a little snippet, not too much.
So I'm Ellie. I'm from London 360, which is a television show which covers stories on London's hidden communities. And I'm going to be talking about hypermasculinity in hip-hop today.
Fantastic.
And I'm a 90s baby as well, so
good.
Good
stuff. So I personally think that in today's society, we kind of have a microwave mentality in so many different shapes, whether it's to do with how quickly we want our food and how fast we digest information, technology, and I think music has a massive part to play in that. I kind of think that a lot of artists and fans, to be honest, are kind of just churning out what's quick and what's fast and what's now. What do you think of today's music, being a 90s baby?
I still think there's a lot of thought that goes into the lyrical content, but depending on the artist. And I think with what we hear today, it is reinventing what it means to be a rap artist and what it means to work in hip-hop. So I'm looking at hypermasculinity in hip-hop. Hypermasculinity is an exaggeration of masculine traits as we've come to recognise them in Western culture. And to make my point, I'm just looking at the history of hip-hop, taking you on a timeline from the 70s with the block parties, through to the 90s, through to what we hear now.
Fantastic. Well, it's a great piece. Make sure you listen and give us your opinion.
Hip-hop. In the early years, it came out of battling. It was about being the best. It was about, through your lyrics or through your moves, being able to take down your opponent. With that, in this male-dominated arena, comes a very dominant, brazen, brash attitude. The idea of masculinity is strong because in a freestyle battle, it is the competitor's goal to diss their opponent, with heavy emphasis being placed upon the rapper's improvisational ability. The competitor's masculinity is measured by his creativity and intelligence. According to George the Poet, this view of masculinity in rap has now been hijacked. Rappers no longer care about what comes out of their mouths.
Ladies and gentlemen!
We've been fed this image, of the big hard black man with all of these women and all of this money and all of these cars. There's all these perceptions flying around. All that actually matters is my reality.
We ain't going nowhere. We can't be stopped now, cause it's bad boy.
In the package of hypermasculinity, are the rappers we see today losing sight of what it really means to be a man in hip-hop? Critics such as Toby S. Jenkins believe so. He argues that the 5 core elements of hip-hop now translate into the 5 racist stereotypes of the black man: self-centred, uneducated, angry, misogynistic and thuggish. According to rapper Akala, this reflection of black culture is really a reflection of the prejudices and tastes of rich white middle-class men who run the music industry.
All of these black entrepreneurs and record label owners and everything else, as successful as they are, as much money as they have, congratulations to them. They do not run rap music. They don't own a single distribution company. They don't own any of the major networks in America. They are not in the scheme of the music industry. They are small fry compared to the old rich white men that run, own and control the music industry. And they will do as they're told by those old rich white men, or they will find themselves out of a job.
But is that really true? What about Birdman, P. Diddy, Jay-Z, Dr. Dre? Musician Isabel Higuera from Bristol called Akala's accusation silly and bizarre.
I disagree with that. I don't think that is the music industry, and would be absolutely terrified if it was. To say that they don't want to be stereotyped anymore, but to then put a stereotype on the music industry as a whole sounds just silly. It's bizarre.
Wretch32 also believes that rappers are no longer boxed into these racist stereotypes and can now wear their hearts on their sleeves.
It did used to have to be quite strict, and you had to be quite hard and quite tough and speak about a certain thing. But I think now people are allowed to be themselves. There's a new wave of people coming through, like the J. Cole's. He's not really that hood kind of rapper, or Childish Gambino. He's not at all.
Got me up all night, yeah.
He's another guy that kind of wears his heart on his sleeve, Drake. There are always some people that slightly criticise him, but the guy is the biggest rapper at the moment. It was a beautiful thing that he even came through and got to the position he did, because he's not typical, he's not hood, he's not street, he's not from New York, he's from Toronto.
Even so, according to Femi, a young musician from South East London, the hypermasculinity within Drake is there. It's just been repackaged.
Drake is more than happy to say that he has a girl for himself in every state of America, and he has a girl that will only exclusively have sex with him and nobody else because she's his. And he's still very braggadocious. He raps about the money he's made, the success he's made, how he's better than others, how a lot of people are on his plateau.
Hypermasculinity in hip-hop. What does it now mean in 2014 to be a man in this music industry?
So I just firstly want to say I thought that was a brilliant piece.
Thank you.
I think you managed to fit a lot in a short space of time.
Yeah.
And there's so much to touch on. So first of all, what's the main thing that you think you just generally, what did you learn from just that whole experiment on and kind of digging deep on that topic?
With Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, it was about, I'm rapping to the beat and me, the groove, my friends are going to try to move your feet. And that was the whole theme of hip hop during that time. It wanted you to move your feet, it wanted you to enjoy yourself. It wasn't really too culturally involved. Then it moved to the 90s, it got more political. Noughties, I think, saw some of the most misogynistic and homophobic rap that we've ever listened to. Whereas now, I think, I do agree with Reg too. I do think that rappers can be more themselves and not really stereotyped into a box anymore.
It's such a good debate so far. We have had a couple of comments coming in. I'll just read one quickly for you. Miss Gina on Twitter says, that's very interesting piece. Got me thinking about male rappers, especially Drake, differently. And I'm glad it has, because the same thing, I listened to it a couple of times and straight away, first time I was like making notes and I was like, if I make notes I can't listen. So I listened to it again and again, and trust me, there's so many different angles that I thought of. Mainly, as I said, I'm an R&B head, and I do think lyrics have changed over time. There's still good music being made today. But when I even started thinking about it, I thought, gosh, let's say your Sam Smiths and your Adeles and your Amy Winehouses, you wouldn't necessarily put them in your R&B box.
No.
And typically speaking, they're like very today's artists. But in terms of what I kind of grew up on, let's say your Brandys and your Monicas and that kind of era, your Jodeci's, we've gone from whispering sweet nothings and talking about let's get married and I love you so much to booty popping and twerking and all sorts. I think that's a lot to do with, perhaps music, the male hip-hop culture, so to speak. And I mean, what do you think? How do you think the state of today's R&B and hip-hop, especially when it comes to, let's say, female rappers, female fans, and just female society?
Well, you look at women like Missy Elliott and Lauryn Hill. I mean, they never had to take their clothes off and they still smashed it. So you could say, women don't have to be like Nicki Minaj, slut dropping, shaking their ass, to gain commercial success. But someone like Nicki, where it's Anaconda, she says, you can tell Miss O'Neill's come through and, effing in my automobile. She's saying that she's the one having sex, she's the one that's doing the driving, she's the one in control.
This is such a good one. So you touched on in your piece the whole idea of previously battles and the whole intellectual kind of battles, and I'd say the inspiration behind the lyrics that kind of used to come out in hip hop before. Now it's kind of moved away from kind of the intelligent battle, the intelligent kind of taking out the opponent, and moved more towards the brash, harsher sort of lyrics. I mean, how have you found it today, and what would you compare? How would you compare like then and now?
Well, I think what's important to realise is that the whole idea of prison culture does run throughout hip-hop. 90s was all about this uprising, this whole, this is the sound of the police. And then Dead Prez hip-hop was talking about, killing white guys. And it's the whole corruption idea and going against what the government preaches. And that is, Jay-Z in Reasonable Doubt, he does reinvent that and how he portrays himself as like an old-style gangster, an old-style criminal. By comparing himself, it's Biggie compares himself to someone like Frank Sinatra in Brooklyn's Finest. Frank Sinatra wasn't a criminal, but he had strong ties with the mafia. He was respected by them, he performed in clubs and theatres controlled by the mafia. And Jay-Z kind of says, you know, this is what I am like too. I adopt two different roles. I'm a rapper, I'm a performer, but I also have strong ties with criminals. And by saying that he's sort of involved in the mafia, he says, yeah, the mafia controls the police. So he's not running from the police, he's controlling the police.
That is such an interesting analogy. I'd love to know what you think. Make sure you jump on Twitter at Westside FM and stay with us.
Westside.